I didn't recognize my own shirt until it was walking away from me. That's the kind of sentence that sounds foolish when you say it out loud. But that morning, standing barefoot on the cool marble floor of my kitchen, with the ocean stretched wide and blue beyond the glass, it landed in my chest like a dropped plate. Sharp. Sudden. Impossible to ignore. The sun had just begun its slow climb, pouring itself through the floor to ceiling windows of the house. It bought because someone once told me success should come with a view. The coffee in my hand was still too hot to drink. And I remember that because I was lifting it carefully, like the heat mattered, like anything did. And then I saw her. She was walking along the edge of my private beach, close enough that I could make out the way the sand clung to her ankles, the way her dark hair kept escaping the loose knot at the back of her head. A small boy trailed behind her, dragging a plastic shovel, stopping every few steps to poke at something interesting. Seashell, rock, life. What froze me wasn't the trespassing. It wasn't even the audacity of someone wandering so comfortably on land I'd paid an obscene amount of money to fence off. It was the shirt. A blue Oxford, faded just enough to be soft. A small tear near the cuff of the left sleeve, my fault, years ago, catching it on the edge of a filing cabinet during a late night I barely remembered. I hadn't worn it in months, maybe longer. But I knew it the way you know your own signature. I stood there longer than I cared to admit, watching the back of a woman I didn't know wear something that once belonged to me, my coffee going cold in my hand. At 42, I was used to control, used to certainty. I ran a company with my name on the building. I decided markets with a sentence, lives with a signature. But that morning, nothing fit where it was supposed to. I set the mug down harder than necessary and headed for the stairs. 5 minutes later, the sand was warm under my feet, the smell of salt and kelp thick in the air. The sound of the waves had always been my favorite part of the house, steady, predictable, like breathing. I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of how intrusive my voice might sound against that calm. "Excuse me," I called. "This is private property." She turned quickly, startled, one hand instinctively moving toward the child. Up close, I noticed her eyes first. Green, the kind that looked like they'd seen disappointment and learned to stand upright anyway. "Oh," she said, already crouching to gather the boy's scat. "I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We'll go." "That's not what I'm concerned about," I said, before I could soften it. She paused, halfway to standing, confusion crossing her face. I pointed, feeling ridiculous and oddly exposed all at once. "That shirt, it belongs to me." For a moment, the world went very still. Even the boy stopped digging. "What?" she said, her hand tightening at the hem of the fabric as if she could anchor herself to it. "No, that's impossible. I got it from Rosa." At the sound of that name, footsteps hurried down the wooden steps behind me. Rosa, my housekeeper of nearly 12 years, appeared breathless, her apron still dusted with flour. "Leia," she exclaimed, relief and worry colliding in her voice. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. This is my niece, Leia Dawson." "Leah, this is my employer, Carter Hayes." I saw the recognition hit her then, the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes flicked briefly to the house and back to me. You're Carter Hayes," she said quietly. "The CEO." Before I could respond, the boy tugged at the front of my shirt with both hands. "Mommy," he whispered loudly. "Are we in trouble?" Something in my chest shifted. Not cracked, softened. Rosa explained quickly, words tumbling over one another. Leah was a teacher, a single mother. Staying with her for the summer while she figured things out. The shirt had come from a donation box at Grace Community Center. Old clothes, gently used. Nothing special. I remembered then, months ago, my assistant clearing out closets, boxes taped and labeled without my input. "We'll donate these," she'd said. I'd nodded, already thinking about something else. The boy, Jacob, I would later learn, looked up at me with earnest eyes. "My mommy works really hard," he said, "but sometimes we don't have money for new clothes." I don't know what expression crossed my face, but Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. "It's fine," I said finally, the word surprising even me. Really? Keep the shirt. Any family of Rosas is welcome here. I turned to go, eager to retreat back into the quiet order of my house, but a small voice stopped me. Mister, Jacob called, do you want to see my sandcastle? It has a moat. Against my better judgment, I knelt in the sand. That was how it began. Not with fireworks or declarations. Just a borrowed shirt, a child's crooked castle, and a morning that refused to stay ordinary. Before that day, my life had been clean, efficient, empty in ways I didn't have language for yet. My days followed a pattern so tight it could have been printed and laminated. Wake before dawn, gym, shower, coffee, emails before the sun fully rose. The house was quiet except for Rosa's radio humming softly in the kitchen, old boleros that smelled like her childhood and didn't belong to mine. I had been married once, long enough to know how silence can turn sharp when shared. We'd parted amicably, the way two people do when they've both decided to stop pretending. No children, no shouting, just a settlement and a handshake and a relief. I didn't question. Work filled the space neatly. Hayes Innovations wasn't just a company, it was proof. Proof that discipline mattered. That vision paid off. That if you kept moving forward, you wouldn't have to look too closely at what you were leaving behind. Meals were usually eaten standing up. The house, this house, was more museum than home. Everything placed carefully, nothing worn enough to tell a story. But that morning on the beach cracked the routine open just enough to let something unfamiliar breathe. By the time I returned upstairs, sand still clinging to my knees, the coffee was cold, and I didn't bother reheating it. I stood by the window again, watching Leah and Jacob walk away this time, the blue of my old shirt bright against the pale morning. And for the first time in a long while, I wondered what else in my life I had given away without noticing. Before Leah and Jacob, my mornings had been quiet in a way that felt intentional, curated, even. Silence as a design choice. After them, the quiet felt unfinished, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. I tried to shake it off. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was nothing more than a strange encounter, the kind that happens when you live too close to other people's lives. I went back to my routine, to conference calls and spreadsheets, and the comforting weight of decisions that only affected balance sheets. But the next morning I found myself lingering at the window again. They were there. Leah sat on a faded beach towel near the dunes, her legs tucked beneath her, a paperback balanced in one hand, while the other shaded her eyes as she watched Jacob. He was already knee-deep in a new construction project, this one ambitious and doomed, the way only children's plans can be. I noticed the way she smiled without realizing it, the way her shoulders loosened when she laughed at something he said. She was still wearing the shirt. I told myself it didn't matter. Clothes were just fabric. But I felt an odd pull, like seeing a familiar object in the wrong place and wanting to straighten it, not out of ownership, but recognition. Rosa caught me watching. She'd come up behind me quietly, as she always did. She hasn't laughed like that in a long time, Rosa said, following my gaze. I didn't look away. She seems steady. Rosa nodded. Life made her grow up fast. That was all she said. But Rosa had a way of packing entire histories into a single sentence. I knew better than to ask her to unpack it unless she wanted to. Is it all right if they use the beach? She asked carefully. Just for the summer. It's fine, I said, too quickly. Then softer. They're welcome. The word surprised me again. Over the next few days, those mornings became something like a habit, not planned. Just there. I'd take my coffee outside, sit on the low stone wall that separated the manicured lawn from the wildness of the sand. Sometimes Leah would wave. Sometimes she wouldn't notice me at all, too busy negotiating peace treaties between Jacob and the ocean. The first time we spoke again, it was Jacob who bridged the distance. He ran up to me, shovel in hand, cheeks flushed. "Mr. Carter," he said proudly, as if we were old friends. "My mom says thank you for letting us stay." "You're welcome," I replied, crouching slightly so we were eye level. "What are you building today?" "A fort," he said, "for bad days." I didn't ask what qualified as a bad day. Some truths don't need explaining. Leah approached more slowly, an apology already forming on her face. I hope he's not bothering you. Not at all, I said, and meant it. We talked then, really talked. Not about work or weather, but about small things that somehow felt larger. She taught third grade, loved it, even when it exhausted her. Tejet moved 3 times in 5 years, chasing affordable rent and better school districts. Jacob's favorite food was pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Hers was whatever was cheapest that week. I didn't volunteer much about myself. Old habits die hard, but she knew who I was, and she didn't ask the questions people usually did. No curiosity sharpened by opportunity. No subtle awe. That alone felt like a gift. Some afternoons, meetings ran long and I didn't make it to the beach. On those days I felt a strange sense of absence, like missing a note in a melody you didn't realize you'd memorized. Other days I joined them without thinking, shoes abandoned, phone left inside. We talked while Jacob played, our words drifting in and out like the tide. One evening, a storm rolled in fast and unapologetic. The sky darkened, the wind picking up sand and secrets alike. By the time I noticed, rain was already falling hard. I grabbed towels, an old thermos, and ran down to the guest house where Rosa lived. Leah and Jacob followed, soaked and laughing, Jacob shrieking at the cold water splashing his legs. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and soap. Rosa fussed over them, pressing mugs of hot chocolate into small hands and larger ones. Jacob curled up at the table, steam fogging his glasses as he sipped carefully. Leah stood near the sink, wringing water from the hem of the blue shirt. You don't have to keep wearing it, I said, suddenly aware of how personal that fabric had become. She looked up, startled. Then she smiled. Just a little, I know. But it's comfortable, and Jacob says it smells like safety. I didn't know what to do with that sentence. So I let it sit between us. We ended up at the small kitchen table, rain tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. Rosa retreated to give us space, the way she always did when she sensed something unfolding. Leah told me about her marriage. Short, uneven. A man who loved the idea of family more than the work of it. She didn't speak bitterly, just plainly, like someone recounting facts they'd already made peace with. I told her about mine, about how success can sometimes feel like winning a game no one else is playing. About the nights the house felt too large, too quiet. She listened, really listened, no fixing, no pity. As the storm eased, Jacob fell asleep at the table, his head pillowed on his arms. Leah covered him with a towel, her touch gentle, practiced. That was the moment something settled in. Not love, not yet, something quieter, like recognition. Summer moved the way it always does, slowly when you're in it, suddenly when it's gone. We fell into an easy rhythm, mornings on the beach, evenings when I cooked more than I ordered in, conversations that deepened without urgency. I learned the way Leah took her coffee, how she paused before answering difficult questions, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. And yet, beneath it all, there was an awareness we never named, a line we both saw and didn't cross. Until the day she pulled away. It was subtle at first. Shorter conversations, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. One morning she wasn't on the beach at all. When I finally asked, she exhaled slowly, like someone bracing for impact. You live in a different world, Carter, she said. What happens when you get tired of playing family? The words landed heavier than she intended. Or maybe exactly as heavy. I'm not playing, I said quietly. She shook her head, tears bright but contained. You don't mean to. But I can't afford to attend. 2 days later, she and Jacob were gone. Back to her apartment. Back to a life that didn't include borrowed shirts or private beaches. The house felt emptier than it ever had. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I stood to lose. After Leah left, the house went back to behaving the way it always had. Polite, distant, and too well-mannered to ask questions. The beach was still there. The waves still rose and fell with their dependable rhythm. But the mornings lost their shape. I kept expecting to see Jacob's crooked footprints in the sand, the uneven towers of his castles giving way to the tide. Instead, there was only smooth shoreline, erased clean each night, as if nothing had ever happened there at all. For days, I told myself it was for the best. That Leia had been right. Our lives ran on different tracks, parallel but never meant to meet for long. I buried myself in work, took meetings I didn't need to take, answered emails at hours that made my assistant gently ask if I was sleeping. I wasn't. At night, I found myself sitting in rooms I rarely used. Lights off, listening to the echo of my own footsteps when I moved. I noticed things I'd ignored before. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the way the wind rattled a loose shutter near the guest wing. Small sounds, suddenly loud. Rosa noticed too. "You miss them," she said one evening, not as a question but a truth. I didn't deny it. I don't know what to do with that. She dried her hands on her apron, her eyes kind but firm. Then you learn. A week passed. Then another. The first real crack came during a board meeting. It into Poncha. "You tenda?" Attended on autopilot. Men and women I'd known for years had around the table, talking about quarterly projections, market dominance, expansion strategies. Words I'd once loved now felt strangely hollow. Someone asked me where I saw the company in 5 years. The room waited, and for the first time, I saw instead a small kitchen smelling of cinnamon. A child asleep at a table, a woman standing in borrowed clothes, afraid of hoping. "I need time," I said finally. The silence that followed was not respectful, it was stunned. That afternoon I drove without direction, until I found myself in a part of the city. Leah's neighborhood wasn't dangerous, just tired. Buildings with peeling paint, cars that had seen better decades, children playing too close to busy streets. I parked and sat for a long moment, hands on the wheel, unsure if I was crossing a line she'd clearly drawn. When I finally walked up to her building, my chest felt tight in a way no business deal had ever managed to produce. Leia was coming down the stairs with Jacob when she saw me. She stopped short. He didn't. "Mr. Carter," Jacob shouted, breaking into a run. I caught him without thinking, his small body colliding with mine, arms wrapping around my waist with the confidence of someone who assumes they are welcome. Leia followed more slowly, her face guarded. "I didn't know if I should come," I said. Honesty felt safer than explanation, but I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. She glanced at Jacob, then back at me. "This isn't your world." "I know," I replied, "and I don't want it to be." We walked to a nearby park, the kind with old benches and tired swings. Jacob ran ahead, already narrating a game, only he understood. "I sold my company," I said once we were seated. Her head snapped toward me. "What?" "Most of it," I corrected gently. "I stepped down as CEO." She stared, disbelief giving way to something like fear. "Carter, that was your life's work." "It was my work," I said, "not my life." I told her about the foundation, small, focused, centered on children's education, on classrooms that needed books more than screens, teachers who deserved support, not slogans. She listened, tears gathering but not falling. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "I know," I said. Jacob returned then, dragging a stick twice his height. "Mom, look," she smiled at him, then at me, that same unguarded smile from the beach. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I said, "but I'd rather be scared together than comfortable alone." She reached for my hand, tentative. Really, 6 months later, we moved into a house that felt like a home because it didn't try too hard. Close to her school, close to the foundation offices. Rosa came too, of course, she insisted. The beach house became a weekend place, full of sand and laughter and things left out of place. Sometimes I watch Leah reading to Jacob, still wearing that blue Oxford on quiet mornings, and I think about how life changes, not in grand gestures, but in small moments you almost miss. Finding someone in my clothes led me to finding my heart. The greatest wealth I've learned isn't counted. It's lived. The trouble didn't arrive loudly. It rarely does. It came disguised as concern, wrapped in polite language and careful smiles, the kind people use when they're about to protect themselves at your expense. I didn't see it at first. I was too busy learning how to live a life that included dinner at a table instead of over a laptop. Too busy memorizing the way Jacob liked his bedtime stories read. Slow, with voices, no skipping pages. The foundation was still new when the first article appeared. I found it early one morning, the house quiet except for the soft clink of Leah's spoon against her mug. The headline sat there on my tablet, bold and invasive. Billionaire CEO's midlife philanthropy raises eyebrows. I mentor CEO, billionaire CEO's pipre. Seven toplets to the cumbing hemmick and a cumbing. I read it twice, then a third time, the words blurring together in a way numbers never had. The piece wasn't outright cruel. That would have been easier. Instead, it was surgical, questioning motives, suggesting optics, hinting at impropriety without naming any. There was a photo of Leah, not smiling. Just her, walking Jacob into school, my old blue Oxford visible beneath her coat. Leah saw my face before I said anything. "What is it?" she asked, already bracing. I handed her the tablet, watched as her expression shifted from confusion to something colder, something I recognized too well. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said quietly. "They're speculating," I replied. "They don't know you. They don't need to," she said. "They just need a story." The article spread faster than truth ever does. By noon, donors were calling. By evening, the board wanted a meeting. Words like conflict of interest and public perception were being used with practiced ease. Someone asked if Leah had influenced my decision to step down. Another asked if the foundation's focus on education was connected to her profession. I answered calmly, carefully, but each question felt like a small cut, precise and intentional. I could feel it in the way she lay beside me, body tense, breath shallow, as if rest itself were a risk. "This is my fault," she said into the dark. "No," I said immediately. "It isn't." She turned toward me, her face half lit by the moon. "You don't get to decide that alone." The next day, the real betrayal revealed itself. It wasn't the press. I expected that. It was my assistant, my former assistant, who'd stayed on in a consulting role after I stepped down. A man I'd trusted with everything from confidential negotiations to the spare key to my office. He'd leaked the donation records. No, not obviously. Just enough context stripped away to make things look questionable. Timelines blurred. Conversations reframed. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. "You're throwing away everything we built," he said, not unkindly. "I'm just managing the narrative." For whom? For the investors. For yourself, eventually. I realized then that he truly believed that in his mind, protecting an institution mattered more than protecting people. I terminated his contract that afternoon. The fallout was immediate. More articles, more questions. Leah's school received calls, concerned. She came home one day with her shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. "I can't do this," she said, sitting at the kitchen table long after dinner had gone cold. "Jacob is hearing things. Kids repeat what their parents say." Guilt settled heavy in my chest. This was the world I'd invited her into, sharp edges and all. "I'll fix it," I said. She looked at me then, really looked. How? By telling the truth. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday. I asked for the floor and took it without notes, without polish. And I told them about the morning on the beach, about the shirt, about the child who built forts for bad days, about realizing that success without connection is just another kind of poverty. I disclosed everything, every decision, every timeline. I invited scrutiny instead of fearing it. Some faces softened, others too. But when it was over, the vote was unanimous. The foundation would stand, transparent, independent, protected. The press moved on, as it always does. There's always another story. But the damage lingered in quieter ways. Leah withdrew again, not out of anger this time, but caution. A self-protection I understood too late. One evening, she sat across from me, fingers racked around a mug she hadn't touched. "I need to know this isn't temporary," she said. "Not the foundation. Us." I reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. "I can't promise the world won't be cruel," I said. "But I can promise I won't run when it is." She studied my face, searching for something, certainty, maybe. or courage. Finally, she nodded. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. And I knew then that love, like trust, isn't proven in comfort. It's proven in storms. After the board meeting, after the articles thinned and the phone stopped ringing quite so loudly, I realized something uncomfortable but necessary. Damage doesn't disappear just because the noise does. Leah didn't leave. She didn't threaten to. But something in her shifted, subtle, almost polite. She smiled the same. She laughed at Jacob's jokes. She packed lunches and graded papers and asked me about my day. But there was a carefulness to her now, like someone walking across thin ice with practiced steps. And I couldn't blame her. So instead of grand gestures, I chose something harder. Consistency. I showed up, every day, not as the man with resources, but as the man who kept promises small enough to be kept. I walked Jacob to school when Leah had early meetings. I attended parent-teacher nights quietly, sitting in undersized chairs, listening more than speaking. I learned which bills made her anxious and paid none of them unless she asked, because pride, I was learning, was not something to bulldoze with good intentions. At the foundation, I made changes that were long overdue. I stepped back from being the face of it. Hired an executive director with a background in public education, someone who'd spent years in classrooms that smelled like old books and dry erase markers. I put policies in writing, conflict disclosures, independent audits, so no one would ever have to guess again. Transparency, it turns out, is its own kind of apology. The real test came a month later. Leah was invited to speak at a district meeting about underfunded classrooms. She almost said no. Public attention had become something sharp, something to avoid. "I don't want them to think I'm using you," she said one night, folding laundry with more force than necessary. "You aren't," I replied. "And if you were, you'd still deserve to be heard." She went anyway. I sat in the back of the auditorium, unnoticed, listening as she spoke with the same calm authority I'd seen her use with Jacob in his bedtime negotiations. She didn't mention me. Didn't mention the foundation. She talked about children who came to school hungry, about teachers who bought supplies with their own money, about potential that went unseen because it wasn't profitable. When she finished, the room was quiet in that rare, reverent way. That night she cried, not from fear, but release. "I forgot who I was for a while," she admitted. "I let other people define me." I held her and understood that loving someone sometimes means stepping far enough back that they can see themselves clearly again. The final confrontation came from an unexpected place. My ex-wife called. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since the paperwork had been signed and filed and neatly archived. Her voice was familiar, careful. "I've been seeing the news," she said. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you found something that matters to you." It wasn't forgiveness or regret, just acknowledgement. And somehow that was enough. The last real action I took wasn't public at all. I returned to Grace Community Center one quiet afternoon, carrying boxes this time, but not of clothes, of books, of art supplies, of things children use to imagine futures bigger than their circumstances. No press, no announcements. Just me, stacking boxes, listening to the echo of Jacob's laughter in my memory. That evening, Leah found me on the porch, watching the sun slip into the ocean. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel it," I replied. She sat beside me, resting her head against my shoulder. I think I trust this now. Not you. This, us." It wasn't a declaration. It was something better. It was real. And I knew then that whatever came next, scrutiny, setbacks, misunderstandings, we'd meet it standing side by side, not as an image, not as a story, but as people. Learning slowly how to choose each other again and again. The truth has a way of traveling quietly at first, then all at once. By autumn, the foundation had begun to take root in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but steady. Classrooms received supplies without strings attached. Teachers received grants without having to perform gratitude. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the narrative around my decision shifted, not because I corrected it, but because people saw the work. Still, public consequence doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like exposure. The same assistant who had leaked the donation records tried to position himself as a whistleblower when the company announced a new round of layoffs I no longer had any control over. He gave interviews, framing himself as a guardian of corporate ethics, hinting at corruption without evidence. This time, the response was different. Former colleagues contradicted him publicly. Documentation surfaced, not maliciously, just accurately. His credibility thinned under the weight of facts. Watching it unfold, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet resolve. I didn't speak about him. I didn't need to. Leia noticed. "You're not angry," she said one evening as we washed dishes together. "Jacob asleep upstairs." "I was," I admitted, "but anger keeps you tied to the thing that hurt you." She smiled, small and knowing. "You're changing." "So are you," I replied. The real public moment came unexpectedly during the Foundation's first open house. Teachers, parents, donors, people from different worlds sharing the same space without ceremony. Leia had been invited at the last minute, reluctantly agreeing to attend as a guest, not a representative. A woman approached her near the refreshment table. "I recognize you," she said hesitantly, "from the article." Leia stiffened, old reflexes rising, but the woman continued, "I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter's classroom received supplies this year." It mattered. Leia blinked, then nodded. "I'm glad." The woman turned to me then. "You did something right. It wasn't absolution. It was acknowledgement, and it was enough." Later that night, Leia took my hand as we walked home, the city air cool and forgiving. "I don't feel like I'm hiding anymore," she said. I squeezed her fingers. "Neither do I." The consequences weren't all external. Jacob began asking questions. "Why do people take pictures of you sometimes?" he asked one afternoon, swinging his legs off the edge of the couch. I thought carefully. "Because they think my job is interesting." "Is it?" he asked. I smiled. "Sometimes, but not as interesting as you." "My job is building forts," he said seriously, "and helping my mom." Leia met my eyes across the room, something unspoken passing between us. "That night after Jacob was asleep," Leia said, "I don't want him growing up thinking worth comes from money or attention." "I don't either," I replied. We made a decision then, quiet, mutual. Fewer events, more privacy, boundaries that protected the small life we were building. The world didn't disappear. It just stopped being the loudest voice in the room. By winter, the house felt different. Worn in, lived in. Mugs chipped. A home that bore the marks of people who belonged to it. One evening, as Leia graded papers at the dining table, she looked up and said, "Do you ever think about that shirt?" I laughed softly. "More often than I should." She smiled. "I kept it." "I know." She reached out, taking my hand. "It reminds me that sometimes the things we think we're losing are actually leading us somewhere." I thought of the man I'd been before, measuring days and output, relationships and convenience. I didn't resent him. He'd done the best he knew how. But I was grateful I didn't have to be him anymore. Public consequence isn't always about being seen fall. Sometimes it's about being seen choose differently and letting that choice ripple outward, quietly, honestly, until it finds its place. Healing didn't arrive with relief. It arrived with routine. That surprised me. I'd expected some clear emotional marker, a moment where the past loosened its grip and the future announced itself with confidence. Instead, what came was steadiness. Days that stacked gently on top of one another without drama or demand. Winter softened into spring. Mate, into Jacob learned to ride a bike on the quiet street outside our house, wobbling fiercely, refusing help until the last possible second. Leia stood on the sidewalk, hands pressed together at her chest, fear and pride sharing the same breath. And when he finally rode 5 full seconds without falling, he looked back at us like he'd just conquered a continent. That night, he asked if we could plant a garden. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "So things can grow where we live," he said. We planted tomatoes, basil, something labeled wildflowers that turned out to be stubborn but beautiful in its own time. At the foundation, I stopped trying to prove anything. The work spoke when it needed to. I learned how to listen without strategizing, how to step aside without disappearing. Letting go of control was harder than acquiring it ever had been, but infinitely more rewarding. Leia changed too. She took on a mentorship role at her school, guiding younger teachers who looked at her with the same mix of hope and exhaustion she'd once carried alone. I watched her confidence return not as armor, but as ease. She laughed more freely. She rested without guilt. One evening, as we folded laundry together, she said, almost casually, "I don't feel like I'm surviving anymore." I stopped folding. "I feel like I'm choosing," she continued. "Every day." That word stayed with me. Choosing. Love, I was learning, wasn't a single leap. It was a series of quiet decisions made when no one was watching. To stay, to listen, to risk disappointment without demanding certainty in return. The last of the tension resolved itself in an unexpected way. My former assistant sent a letter, short, measured. He didn't apologize outright. He acknowledged harm, admitted fear, wrote that watching the Foundation succeed without spectacle had made him question the version of success he'd defended so fiercely. I read it once, then folded it carefully and put it away. Forgiveness doesn't always. That spring, Leia and I took Jacob back to the beach house for a long weekend. The same stretch of sand, the same horizon, but it felt like a different place entirely. Jacob rebuilt his original sandcastle design, moat included. Leia sat nearby, reading, the blue Oxford shirt tied loosely around her waist like a familiar companion. I watched them from the porch, the breeze carrying laughter up to me in uneven bursts. Rosa joined me, handing over a glass of iced tea. "You look peaceful," she said. "I am," I replied. She nodded, satisfied. "Good, you worked hard for it." That night, after Jacob fell asleep to the sound of waves, Leia and I walked the shoreline together. The moon painted everything silver, forgiving. "I used to think love meant security," she said. "Now I think it means trust." I used to think security came from control, and now I think it comes from showing up, I said, even when it's uncomfortable. She stopped walking, turning to face me. The ocean moved around us, patient and eternal. "I don't need you to save me," she said. "I know," I replied. That's why I love you," she smiled then, not brightly, not dramatically, just honestly. We didn't make promises that night, no timelines, no declarations meant to lock the future into place. We didn't need to. We were already living the answer. By the time summer returned, the story of the billionaire CEO and the single mother had faded into something else, less myth, more memory. Occasionally, someone would recognize me. Occasionally, someone would whisper. It didn't matter. What mattered was the smell of dinner cooking while homework spread across the table. And the weight of Jacob's head on my shoulder during movie nights. The way Leia reached for my hand without thinking, as if it had always been there. Healing, I learned, isn't about erasing the past. It's about integrating it, letting it inform your choices without defining them. And sometimes, it starts with something as small and ordinary as a donated shirt finding its way home. People ask me sometimes when I knew my life had changed. They expect a dramatic answer, a moment charged with certainty. But the truth is quieter than that. Life didn't turn the day I saw a stranger wearing my shirt. It turned the day I stopped believing that everything meaningful had to be earned the hard way, alone. For a long time, I thought success was about distance, from need, from mess, from other people's complications. I built walls high enough that nothing could surprise me anymore, and I called that safety. But what I learned, what Leia and Jacob taught me without ever meaning to, is that safety without connection is just another form of loneliness. Love didn't arrive to rescue me. It arrived to interrupt me, to ask uncomfortable questions, to expose the parts of myself I'd polished into silence. And yes, choosing a different life cost me things. Status, certainty, control. But it gave me something I didn't know how to ask for back then. A sense of belonging that doesn't disappear when the headlines change or the money moves. Sometimes I still see that blue Oxford folded in the laundry. The sleeve still torn, still imperfect. It reminds me that the best parts of life rarely come new or pristine. They come worn, shared, and unexpectedly meaningful. If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's too late to choose differently, whether the life you built has room for something softer, something truer, I want you to know this. It only takes one moment of recognition, one ordinary morning, one decision to stop walking past what's quietly calling your name. So I'll leave you with this question, one I had to answer myself. If love found you in an unexpected place, would you have the courage to let it change you? If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've lived a moment like this or hope to someday, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. Until next time, take care of your heart.